Hello and good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us this evening as we meet to discuss in a bit more detail how the team in your dental practice is at the heart of your NHS conversion. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Katrina James and I'm an area manager at Practice Plan. Practice Plan are partnering with Dental Updates to bring you this evening's webinar. And tonight I'm really delighted to say I'm joined by three very special guests. I've got Jennifer Berndt, who's a business owner and principal dentist. I'll get my teeth in right. Principal owner and business owner and principal dentist at Crescent Dental in Swansea. Lucie Simic, dental consultant and communications trainer. Of course, some of you may have already seen Lucie as a familiar face. And last but not least, Kholosa Vundisa, who's a practice manager at Brundle Dental Care in Norfolk. So ladies, thank you so much for joining me this evening. And I know we've got an awful lot that we're going to talk about, and I'm quite sure it's going to be a very informative discussion. But before we get underway, I think it'd be really nice if I can hand over to yourselves to give you the opportunity to tell the viewers a little bit more about yourselves and exactly what it is you do. So if I come to you first in the order that you are on my screen, Lucie, if you'd like to fire away.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Kat. It's lovely to join you guys here. So as Kat has said, I am Lucie Simic and I am a dental business consultant and communications trainer. So I work with dental practices around the UK on a one-on-one kind of basis, as well as training teams on how to excel at customer service on the patient journey and how to communicate better with their teams, but also with their patients. So yeah, that's me.
You're on mute, Kat, but would you like me to go next?
Yes, please, Jennifer.
Okay. So yeah, my name's Jennifer, or Jen. I recently purchased a practice about 2 years ago now. I was an associate at Crescent Dental since 2017, owner since 2022, and we did our NHS conversion last year. It wasn't a full conversion, it was a partial conversion. We dropped about 40% of our NHS contract, which was worth about 16,000 UDAs. So we've retained part of our NHS contract with a foundation dentist and a couple of associates. Whereas, yeah, we've got two associates who are fully private, and then we've got another associate who's kind of wanting to make that transition herself too. So we're definitely kind of moving in that direction.
You've had a very busy year, haven't you? Indeed.
Yeah.
Sure, you're going to have lots of really good advice for us as we work through this process. Thanks, Jen. And Kholosa, if you'd like to let the viewers know a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you, Kat. Hi, I'm Kholosa. I manage a dental practice in Brundle. It's in Norfolk. The practice owner purchased the practice like Jen 2 years ago, and we started, well, I managed it from about 2 months from the time that she purchased it up to this point. We've converted in September last year. And we also did a partial conversion, and we are now looking forward to acquiring a second practice. So the conversion was a success, thankfully. But yeah, we lead a very strong team in Brundle, with a very, very kind and close patient base as well. So yeah.
Fabulous. And it's really great. Thank you for that, ladies. It's really great. There's a lot of experience on the screen here tonight, and a lot of varied experience as well, which is so helpful for the people watching, because we'll really be able to come at it from a lot of different angles as we delve into the topic further. So we're going to keep it a very relaxed and casual discussion and really talk around the key things that you're going to need to consider if you're thinking of doing an NHS conversion, especially things that are going to be fundamental to success in a practice. So I know from experience, a team that's engaged and has a very clear direction and a good understanding of what's required of them, they're generally a very happy team, and a happy team is generally a productive team. So as we go through this chat, there's going to be an opportunity for viewers to chip in and ask questions. So if you do have any questions, you can simply pop it into the chat, and then I can try and weave them into the discussion as we go along. But if I don't get to it, I will try and leave a little bit of space at the end. I know we can get going when we get talking as ladies, but I hope to answer some more questions for you. So let's kick off this evening then by saying that we know there are a lot more NHS conversions happening a lot more frequently out there. And at Practice Plan, we've supported a huge number of practices through the process. And we know that when a dentist or a practice decides to embark on an NHS conversion and take the decision to hand back that contract, it's one of the most crucial decisions that they're ever going to make. They will have thought very long and very hard before coming to that decision, which I'm sure, Jen, you did, and probably felt very apprehensive about it before the get-go. And I think it's fair to say the success of any conversion ultimately depends on the processes that are set in place in the practice, and of course how it's then managed in practice by the team. So ultimately, regardless of what's going on in the practice, the team are at the coalface of the business. So once the conversion goes live, they are the people that are there facing the patients and dealing with it all. So they play a huge part in what result that you're going to get from your conversion. So with that said, it's really important that they're all on board and they're all really engaged in the vision and the ideal that the converting dentist or practice has. So let's go back and start at the beginning of this process. How would you, as a converting dentist or, you know, as a practice owner, go about communicating that vision with the team? And if I come to you first, Lucie.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Kat. It is so important that the entire team is behind this. And I think that starts from explaining the why we're doing this, what that looks like, because we can often get caught in a scenario where the team is doing something or carrying something out and they don't really know and they can't explain or communicate with the patient. And so they are overwhelmed, and it makes it a very difficult conversation where you have no out, there's no script. So something that I really like to implement is the why, is explaining what the vision is and what this is going to look like a year down the line, because we all know change is uncomfortable. And actually, you've got to remember that this is a team who's been doing something really wonderful for patients working in the NHS, and that has failed for them. It's not working anymore. It's no longer sustainable. And they will have to understand why, because their immediate thought is going to be about the patient, not about the business that you own. And that's a really strange kind of disconnection, because they think we're going to stop serving our patient base. My patient base isn't going to know that we do this any longer. We've stopped caring for them. We don't care about them. So we need to get that narrative correct, that actually this is about caring for them for the long term and about taking it into the future. Because I love the word sustainable when we use that with the team. It isn't sustainable for us to continue to work this way. And I think something that's really important is that we recognize that every day is going to feel a little odd, a little strange, and that potentially some staff members are going to feel relief at this kind of change, that their day is going to look different, that nurses aren't going to be seeing patients in really short, snappy appointments that don't serve anybody. And so we want to create that culture of being able to share. How was your day? What did it look like? It's going to mean lots of communication. It's going to mean starting the day with a huddle so that we're all in the right mindset. It's going to mean checking in throughout the day constantly. So yeah, for me, it really is important that we communicate that why, and then we help them navigate that change.
Fabulous, thanks, Lucie. I think you go back to anything, and what's your why is the first question, isn't it, when you're trying to solve anything? So,
and I think what's another important point in that, strangely, is that I don't know whether anybody watching this or anybody else on tonight has had this, but the generation coming through want more why. I've never ever had so much kind of but why.
Yeah.
And I love the curiosity, but God, you have to remember that they need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see Kholosa smiling away there. That obviously as rung true with her. Kholosa, do you want to pop on and talk about your experiences about communicating the vision? Can you pop off mute, Kholosa, and join in?
Yes, so I really do like that, Lucy, actually, because we have generally you do find that dental nurses tend to be young people, generally, and you find that they are the younger generation that will ask you the whys so many times, and it's so important to be patient and help them understand why they're doing what they're doing, and especially if they've never done it before. And I find that if you explain it clearly why they're doing what they're doing, it is easier for them to improvise when necessary as well, because then they can sort of take whatever you've said and sort of personalize it. So I looked at how they communicate with patients, because they know why we're doing this and how it's going to benefit the patients. They communicated it so well with the patients in terms of saying, well, this is going to be the benefit. I understand that, yes, we get letting go of the NHS and it's going to cost you X, and perhaps you're concerned about that, but this is what this is going to look like, which I thought was really good. So it's so important to answer all of their whys, even though there's like 100 of them. It's so important because they can actually be able to sort of personalize the journey as well. So I really like that. One of the other things that I do like, and I think that would be really helpful, which we implemented, was regular huddles, because then you keep tabs on how everyone is feeling about the process so far. And if someone is struggling, or majority of the team is struggling, then you can sort of reel it in quite early, and then sort of, you know, re-energize the team and say, remember, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. And then everyone can suddenly go out onto the desk, go into surgeries a bit more empowered of the vision, really. So I definitely had to
No,
agree.
it's all good stuff, isn't it? All really important stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I come to you, Jennifer, I mean, obviously you were in quite a unique situation when you embarked on your NHS conversion. Do you want to just talk us through that and how you got your vision out to your team?
Yeah, so I'm based in Wales, and Welsh Government has been making lots of changes since the pandemic. So when it comes to the team involvement, the reality was the team was exhausted. They had dealt with change after change throughout the pandemic. The rules changing. We'd be informed of the change on a Friday afternoon, and the idea was you would implement it on Monday. And this was happening, every couple of months. The standard kept being moved. And then coming out of the pandemic, Welsh Government decided to implement contract reform. That meant completely new targets. We were expected to have, new patient quotas and things like this. It was very difficult for the staff to deal with. And that was very difficult for the staff to communicate to patients about these new metrics and new targets, because it wasn't publicized. It wasn't out in the media. So so far as the public was concerned, we were back to business as usual. But actually, we had this completely new set of targets, completely new way of working, and the staff were exhausted. And you just see them so run down from having argument after argument with patients. And really, it just felt like everyone was at the end of their tether. So as much as the kind of financial stability was a huge factor for me as a practice owner, it's also just the sustainability of, I don't want to lose all my staff. They're at the end of their tether. They need something to change. So communicating to them was not difficult, because they knew it already. They knew something needed to change. I just had to tell them what I was going to do about it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Jen. I mean, and living in Wales myself, I fully understand the complexities that happened coming out of lockdown and all the changes that we had. So you really did go through a full circle. But you're all right. It's so important to take your team on that journey with you, let them understand the why. they know that you want to provide the best care and opportunity for your patients, but they do also need to understand that you need to have a sustainable business also. And you can't always do that. You can't please everything and be everything to everyone. And without the changes in place, sometimes that business isn't going to be sustainable. So you've set out a vision to them, whichever way you've gotten to it, and what you want to achieve and by when. And it sounds like there's really good cultures going on in the practices, with you both there, Jen and Kholosa, when you're speaking about what you're doing in terms of the conversations with the team. So culture is always such a good thing. It generates a happy team if you've got a good culture, and that's led from the top down. But that said, you can have a good culture, but you still need to engage the team, and the team need to get really involved and feel empowered with what you're doing as part of that NHS conversion process and decisions. So how did you go about this, Jen, when you were doing this with your practice? Because clearly you've made some big decisions, you're going to go ahead. How did you get everybody involved in it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's something that was probably rumoured a little bit before I spoke openly about it, and not even with me as the source of that. The previous practice owner, who still works with us as a part-time associate, I mean, he would say openly, "Oh well, if it was me running it, I'd just go private," and that kind of starts this kind of this sort of rumour of, "Oh, would we do that? Is that an option? Is that something that might happen?" And then other practices, you see other practices transitioning to private. Every month or so there's another article in the news about a practice that has transitioned. So it was very much out there as an idea before I'd made that decision. So after making the decision, obviously we had a big practice meeting to talk about what that was going to look like. And then we had Louise from Practice Plan, who was our regional manager, who was just fantastic so she came into a practice meeting, did a bit of a training session, and with her experience of I've done this with many practices, I've heard every question there is to ask, I'm ready for it, kind of thing. That really inspired the staff. It was really reassuring to them to know that, oh, this is tried and tested, like this has been done already. It gave them a lot of confidence in that.
Yeah, fabulous. Great to know you had great support, and it sounds like you had a really good, robust way of getting everybody in. What about yourself, Kholosa? Obviously, you've just come out of the back end of another successful conversion. How did you get the team empowered in the processes and decisions that were made?
It was a very similar sort of route as Jen. Of course, the principal dentist had to do all the research there is. We had quite a few meetings with Tina as well, who was very reassuring, who's our area manager, who was very reassuring, and she gave us all the stats. She gave us all the calculations financially of what it would look like. When the practice owner decided to convert, it was at a financial breaking point, unfortunately. So for us, it was either shut or go private. So we were at that point because she had bought the practice, but it came along with quite a few issues. So it just really got to breaking point. So there were other things as well, but that was the main thing. So when we made that decision, we decided obviously to have a team meeting. We had a conversation, said, okay, guys, this is what we're thinking. How do you feel about it? One of the main things that I tried to make sure I put forward is how it would also help their life, make it easier, and also hear what they were struggling with as well. And as usual, the time crunch was top of the list. So they were struggling with the 5, 9, 10-minute appointments, and they were hoping that would be something that would change. So we went through everyone's sort of troubles working the way that we've been working and what they hope would change. And then we discussed that this is the vision. How do you feel about it? What visions do you guys have? And this is how we're going to hopefully satisfy everyone's vision, and also the business stays afloat. So it was it was a collective, almost a collective decision, if you will, because then we were all now sitting and saying, okay, that would be good if we don't have to do so much in 5 minutes, because then our backs are breaking at this point. And obviously, the principal dentist doesn't have to worry so much about making ends meet every single month. So then everyone was sort of like, okay, this is a good idea. We should do it because this is what we want. We all agreed that great. So this future plan is something that's going to work for all of us. So everyone was on board, and that way we also found that the team came forward a lot with their own suggestions as well of how to implement quite a few things, especially when communicating with patients or displaying any of the information in the practice, so that it is clear and easier for patients to be able to understand why the change is happening or what even is the change. So from then onwards, Tina then came in, sat with the team as well, and also explained to them how many conversions she's done and what the outcome usually is. And then we sort of started our roadmap from then. But from the initial meeting, because we got everyone involved in that sense, it was sort of like a collective journey, really. So yeah, we really just tried to get everyone's grievances attended to as well with the
Fabulous.
conversion. Yeah.
And that's a really important topic. And I can see Lucy nodding away there, so I'm going to slide across to Lucy.
They're both. I mean, both of you have had a fantastic and positive experience out of this, and I think that's something that we probably need to hear more of, see more of, because people are bogged down in the day-to-day survival of dental practices that are caught in this trap. And I think what's interesting in both cases is that the support they've received from practice plan and recognizing that actually there does need to be, and I always say there has to be an ambassador in this. There has to be somebody who's leading from the front. And I'm sure that there will be dental practice owners, dentist owners who are listening and thinking, I don't have time for that. I don't have the energy for that. I don't have, I want to be doing dentistry and the surgery. And so this is where help needs to come in, and you need that support. And that might be an incredible practice manager. It might be the support from practice plan in getting this across the line with the amazing reps. It might be outside sourcing of help from professionals. But it really is, this is not a moment to get wrong and for it to not happen. You've got one shot at it to get this across the line, and to get it across the line in a way that is positive and upbeat. And we talk about culture in teams. Every practice has a culture, and either you like that culture and you've created it and you've fostered it, or you have a culture that you either don't know it really exists or is not very pleasant. And this is a fantastic way of reinventing and starting again. This is that fabulous, as a Virgo, I love it. It's that September new school term, January new year. If somebody sells me new page, I'm in, and that's what I think this does. And I think the same for the teams. They really buy into that kind of, I get a say in this, and watching them flourish, like hearing Kholosa say that about her team coming to them and saying, I've got an idea, why don't we pop this sign in this place? Or when we're speaking to patients on the phone, maybe we should say it this way. They are your greatest fans, your staff, and they can be, and they will be, they should be. And they're the ones that will know. I say this specifically about front of house teams. They'll know how to communicate with your practice patients. They'll know that, we need to do this or we need to do that. And they have such a fantastic way of doing it. And this is the moment to involve them. So when we said at the beginning about how would we start this, not only is it communicating the why, talking about sustainability, but also it's about involving your team where possible. What do you think? How could we do this? And allowing them a say in their future, because I think that's something they haven't had particularly in dentistry, and it's something I really notice in dental culture in practices. There isn't a huge amount of input, and I think genuinely it's why we see people leave, because they don't get a say. They don't get to kind of form a base of what they think they want their work life to look like.
Yeah, fabulous. Honestly, listening to this is like, I'm like a little nodding dog in the corner of the screen, because it's just so important. And I've got to pick up on a few key points here. it's so important that we do have everybody believing in what you're doing when you go to embark on that NHS conversion, and they need to feel confident in what they're doing, and getting them involved just like you all have been, and as Lucie's suggesting, is exactly the right way to be doing it. And another thing then that you've got to think of is that you've got your team set up, they know what your vision is, you've got them engaged, you're asking them for their input, they're involved. But then where do we go from there with it? I think for me, is expectations. We need to be setting some expectations around conversion as well. And I'm not just
and I think our own expectations as well, in terms of repeating things. Often in this kind of change scenario, we can find ourselves, it's really easy. And I know when I was practice manager, repeating myself felt like the worst thing. It was so irritating. But you have to put this kind of, yep, no problem, come in, let's talk about that again. Don't worry about the fact that we talked about it at the huddle, we talked about it in the team meeting, we talked about it individually. We have to be prepared to repeat ourselves and to limit our expectation in what our team is gonna need and want from us.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. So not just in terms about what you want to deliver as a target to replace that income, but it's knowing what responsibilities you're going to delegate to each person, where their accountabilities are, and also in terms of other things that can arise. Like you said earlier, Lucie, you get one opportunity to get this right. There is no rehearsal, especially if you're doing a mailing. Once those letters are gone, it's all systems go. But what you can do is prepare and be ready. So how do you suggest then is best to set expectations? I mean, I know you've touched upon quite a few things there, Lucie, but if I come back to you, Jennifer, how did you sort of set the expectations and set the bar for your team in terms of what you were doing? I know they were quite on board with it, obviously, but there must have been lots of considerations that you had to make or implement.
Yeah, I mean, so we had one receptionist who has been with the practice for 20 years and was there in 2006 when the UDA contract first came into effect, and that was kind of the first time that the practice converted to private. So it was a much smaller practice at that time. It was only one surgery, and it was a much smaller business. But she could remember that, and she could share her experiences of when it happened before. So that was really interesting to have her input in that discussion. And actually, she could compare. So I mean, I'm obviously biased. I've chosen Practice Plan as a provider. At that time, it was Denplan that they were using, and she was kind of comparing how the difference between trying to sell somebody an expensive capitation plan versus, oh well, actually this is really reasonable. This membership plan is starting from as little as $9.95 a month. Like, that's quite an easy thing to talk to patients about. You don't feel like it is such a massive expense that you're forcing on them. So it was really good to have that experience of what's happened in the past, and also the sorts of questions that were asked, the sorts of problems that arose back then, and kind of how to learn from that and how to approach that. I mean, the main thing that I found was there's always going to be those patients you feel really sorry for. Those patients who, because of their circumstances and through no fault of their own, they're just not able to afford private care. Even for the most basic level of plan that we were offering, it was going to be too much for them. And some of these patients have been with the practice for years and years, and people did feel some affection there and felt quite guilty about that. That you've just always got to think of it in terms of, they're not actually our responsibility. They are the health board's responsibility. It is the government's responsibility. It's not our fault that the NHS is in the state that it's in. So as much as there were things that people felt regret over, everybody was in agreement that it was the right move.
Fabulous. Look, actually, Jen, you've just you've spoken about something that it sits in line with a question that I've had pop up, actually, and it was very interesting to hear you draw on past experience, etc. But I'm members of the team who've worked in an NHS-based practice for a long, long time. And one of the questions I've got here is, how do you change the mindset of somebody who's heavily embedded in the NHS and feels it's wrong to be doing this? So I'd like to open that to the floor and, for any of you to answer that.
Do you mean a staff member that's heavily embedded
Yes,
in the
a member of the team, sorry, yes.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, it's only the practice owner who has a financial risk there. So as much as somebody, might feel really strongly about working for an NHS practice, they're never going to have that personal financial risk that we have to deal with. So being really open about that, and showing that it's better to have a practice than no practice. It's better to have private care than no care at all. And realistically, that is the two options.
I think from my point of view, for me, it's about sharing information that potentially we don't share or we don't allow to trickle down from that leadership. So often practice finances and that kind of financial input is not something the team is very aware of. And if you've got a member of staff who's been in the practice for a period of time, quite a long time ordinarily when we're like this, and we're in that mindset of NHS, and they really firmly believe and politically and morally and ethically believe that we should be doing that. I often have that conversation and ask them slightly harder questions and about whether they actually understand what this means, what it looks like. Because a question I ask when I always teach the front of house communication course is around, do you actually understand how an NHS contract works for a dental practice? Because often they go, no, I wouldn't have a clue. And they feel like we are akin to a hospital. And actually what they don't recognize is that we are more like Sainsbury's than we would care to believe. And so I talk about it in that kind of way. So I will discuss with them that a customer who walks down the street and thinks, I need to buy a loaf of bread, and there is a Tesco Express or a Simply Food, Marks and Spencer's, the patient, the customer, has the choice, and they will walk into Marks and Spencer's and they know that bread is probably going to cost £1 more than it would if I walked into my Tesco Express. And then they start thinking about it a bit more kind of like a business. And so the more we trickle that information through and the more we say, hey, actually, this is how much it costs to run a dental practice. Yeah. This is how much, we need to be doing. This is what we need to be looking like. These are the targets. This is what that looks like. Did you know that for every new patient that comes through, we actually privately earn this much more than if we saw the NHS patient? And we have to be really open with them because they don't understand, and they often are, have just been living in a world where they don't know. They're very similar to the public who walk down the street and think exactly the same.
Yeah, you're right. People really haven't got an awareness of how it all works. And, like Jen, the owners do carry the risk with everything. And ultimately, without making tough choices, there could be no business left at the end of it.
Yeah, and it comes back to that sustainable, doesn't it? It's just not sustainable. It's not sustainable for us to spend this amount of money. It's not sustainable.
No. And when, talking of this, I mean, you're probably aware, but a lot of practices, in fact, most practices are subsidising the NHS anyway with their private income now before embarking on this. So all this thought process has gone on beforehand. Kholosa, I'll just come on to you and give you the opportunity to share your experiences about expectations for your team, because I know you had quite a lot of work going on there, didn't you?
I did. I think with our team, I can only share expectations or rather things I've learned in terms of managing expectation. I don't think that we had theoretically we had a roadmap and we expected our roadmap to go as planned, but we didn't anticipate a few things along the way. And I think from that experience, I could definitely share that it's so important to address the amount of work that's going to be required. Lucie touched on a bit on repeating yourself. I did not anticipate how many times I'd have to repeat myself. I did, but you have to have the patience because everyone is new to this. So you have to have the patience for it. You have to also have a longer, I'd say maybe give the success of whatever the vision is maybe a healthy timeline maybe, and not say that this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen, and it's all going to happen very 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 quick. No, it's not, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it needs to be done thoroughly, because again, it's only a one shot only situation. So the work needs to be done thoroughly. So I'd definitely say make sure that you have, to anyone who's considering a transition, just make sure that you have a very good roadmap and you're very clear about the timescales between each step, and
Yeah.
you give grace to the amount of time that you expect to see all your list of things that you want to get done, that you would consider yourself as successful. Give enough time for all those things to materialize, in the sense that you, for example, in the sense of stability. So having that space where all your patients understand that, okay, you've now transitioned, I now am on a plan, and this is what it means for me. It makes me so happy today seeing them walk in and they're like, I'm on the 1+2, this is my second checkup, and I'm like, oh, fantastic, now you got the ropes. Because at the beginning you get you get a lot of, what even is this, how does it work, and then you have to explain yourself. So not only are you explaining yourself to your team, you're explaining yourself to the patients, and you're going to do this a couple of thousand times during your transition, because everyone is new to this. So every patient that gives you a call to get clarity on it, they were not in the conversation with the person before, so you have to explain it like it's a brand new thing, with utmost sympathy and patience. So I would definitely say anticipate that it will take a little bit of time to reach your success point, and you to reach a point where it's fluid and
Yeah.
everyone is clear on what's happening, because fortunately we are there now. It may seem like it was a short span of time, but I think my principal dentist and I thought, oh, it's fine, straight after September we'll be done with this, it'll be good. um, but that was very very unrealistic. So I would have to just encourage people to have a very and also your area managers will be very helpful with this, in terms of helping you create realistic expectations for yourself, realistic expectations for your teams as well. So I think for us it was more of a learning curve. We didn't really have anyone who's experienced transition, so it
Nice.
was just us learning from our own experience, which is all I can share really.
But that's, it's a baptism of fire, isn't it? When you get going, and you soon learn what works, what doesn't, what to say, what not to say. Just got another question coming in here that I just want to slot in whilst we're at this point. Kholosa, you mentioned about repeating yourself to patients and answering lots of questions. I've had somebody ask you, what is the best way to deal with queries that come in via email or telephone? Do you delegate and appoint it to one person? So
Yes. During the transition, I'd definitely say yes, to just minimize confusion, because your team are also still getting the ropes of everything. I dealt with all the patient queries, especially the ones that were a bit more detailed. The ones that were about what each plan is. Of course, everyone knew what each plan is, what it will get each patient, and what to respond to when a patient says, "What plan do I get?" But there were a few more other queries that were a bit more in depth. I would definitely say delegate it to one person, or as a practice manager, deal with it yourself, because then you know that usually you have most of the information anyway. Because we do try not to overburden the team that's dealing with all of this with too much information if it's not necessary. So with our transition, I took all those calls and I took all those emails until everyone was confident in the answers. Again, it was so important to have those constant weekly huddles, sometimes more than once a week, to make sure that everyone is understanding what we're doing and what to say and how what the correct answers are to certain key queries that patients
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
But I'd definitely say during the transition, have one person. It will just minimize the confusion for patients.
I think for me, it's that consistency of message as well. And that's why it's so important to consider what the output is to patients. We've talked about culture and creating that motivation for them, but actually we've also got patients in this who don't understand what's going on, who are confused, who are taking to Facebook or, whatever is going on. And so we need to be consistent. They can't get, well, so-and-so person told me this, and then I phoned up and so-and-so person told me that. So I love, scripting in this as well. So being really clear, scripts often get a bad kind of rep because I'm not talking about, wanting to kind of be a computer and you work through the literal kind of script, but we need to be able to overcome some of those objections with some really important information. And the patient has to hear that consistent message. It's okay. You're going to be okay. We're still here. We can still help you. We can still do all these things. And I think Kholosa's right with, touching on, if you've got the ability and it works in your practice, somebody in authority having that conversation is going to make such a difference. And the reassurance that they will offer is huge. So, think about how you can reach those patients. Is it a video message? Could you put that out from the principal dentist? Could you have a lovely letter written and then back that up with, hey, I'm actually going to be available between these hours if you wanted to come and speak to me, or, making yourself above and beyond available where you wouldn't do it just every day, but this is a really important moment. And the team love you for that. They also need to see that you're in this together with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good point, Lucie. I actually had to take a few of these queries into the office and have one-on-one conversations to just help them feel better about it. So there's going to be that as well. Video message is going to be is a good idea. We didn't think about that, but I scheduled quite a few of these in person. Like, come in, let's sit down and talk about it. Look, I understand it's a bit stressful and confusing, and you don't know what this means for your pocket, but let's talk about it. And so that really does offer them strong reassurance, honestly.
Yeah, uncertainty, anxiety is a really real thing. So it's really important that we capitalize on saying we can help, we're going to be there, we're going to go above and beyond.
Yeah. And, you're talking about this anxiety, your teams in practice, they've all got different experience levels. They've all got different feelings about what's going on in the practice. They've all got their own concerns. And I mean, Jen, you've probably seen it yourself when you've gone through the conversion. It's really important that you get everybody talking in a really open and honest way. And I know there's lots of things you can do, and you've suggested some there in terms of the principal stepping in and really offering some of that support to take some of the heavy questions off those at the coalface. But what other things do you do at practice level to sort of give the team the opportunity to air their concerns and be really open and honest about what's going on? I don't know, Jen, if you've got some tips for us.
So I just going back to your previous question, which was about whether it's good to have one person answering patient queries. We had a bit of a different experience. I don't know how the conversion Kholosa had to deal with. We had a mail out of like 6,000 patients all on one day, and the phone lines were slammed. It was, we have quite a nice setup in our practice where there's like the front desk reception for greeting patients and checking people in and taking payments. We also have a back desk reception, which is completely separate. And it's like a little call center. So you've got 3 phones on the back desk and then one that's portable. And the girls on back desk were literally working like a call center. It was constant. And we were so lucky. So Louise, our area manager, she was there for the whole of the first week that the mail out went out. And it was as soon as there was a query that the nurse on the phone couldn't answer, it was, I'm just going to check, pop you on hold, turn around, Louise, what do I say to this? And it really was, it was so hectic and so busy. We couldn't possibly have had one person dealing with all of that. So, I mean, that came down to having a really good training session to make sure that in advance, all of the nurses and receptionists knew exactly what the plans were, how this was going to work, what this includes for the patient, so that the vast majority of queries anybody could answer. Obviously, there were some more irate patients that I dealt with personally in appointments, or that the practice manager responded to as our complaints manager. But a lot of those complaints, they weren't really expecting a response. They just wanted to vent at you. They just wanted to express their anger. They had no intention of joining us as a private patient. They just wanted to shout, or they just wanted to let off steam. And so that was very much our nurses and receptionists were instructed to politely ask them to put it in writing, and if they continue, just hang up the phone, because you're not getting anywhere with those people. There's no point trying to convince somebody who's already decided that they're angry. So yeah, there was a lot of training before that mail out went out. But yeah, it definitely needed to be a whole team involved in our review.
You touched then, Janet, on such an important point, which is around the training and that communication, then being able to do it. But also, I think it's really important that when you go through something like this, you recognize that your team is also going to need some tips and some tricks in mindset. You know, that thing of how do we actually cope with this? Because that one day, everybody's been there. Everyone's had that D-Day moment where it's been, wow, this is something quite extreme. And how do you come out of the back of that day and go home at night and feel okay about it? And so we have to give them the ability, from a kind of a well-being and mental health place, to be able to deal with it. And so there are lots of things that you can do and lots of people who can talk about it, but we have to recognize that we can't just let them sink in this. And, you know, it can be a really dark, demoralizing moment at the end of a week of phone bashing, basically, and listening to people say horrible things about you and to you. And so some tips and some tricks and some real kind of mindset. This is going to be okay. We're going to get through it. And this is what we're going to do. And a lot of the time, metrics work really well for me for that. So, you know, we've taken 1,000 phone calls across this week, but actually out of it, we've marked down that 100 were negative, or not very pleasant, but actually 900 were us just doing our job. And the moment you have that switch in your brain, you go, do you know, yes, it felt like we had loads of negative patients today, but that's only because I've allowed the negative to dominate my thoughts. Actually, my days are consistently positive.
Yeah, and you're so right, Lucy, because quite often when I'm dealing with conversions, somebody says, oh my gosh, the patients have been saying this and so-and-so has been saying that. But the reality is it's probably been 3 patients out of 500 that you've spoken to throughout that day. You just tend to hang on to the negatives rather than the positives. Sometimes you do need to stop and reflect.
You do. And I think the only way we can do that as leaders in the business is to go, but what about the good, and how about the good, and try and bring some of that back. And then you hit, Tuesday in the week, and Monday was awful. What was Tuesday like? It was a bit better. Brilliant. What was Wednesday like? It was a bit better. Friday, it was better. Monday, you come in, you go, this is going to be brilliant, because all of last week got better and better and better. And we feel like we've hit the top of the hill. But we can't go into it thinking that they're just going to fly and it's going to be amazing, because they are going to need help.
Yeah, you're right. And there are moments when things don't quite go as you think they're going to go, or you've got a little niggle to address. And with anything, there's challenges, isn't there? Nothing is plain sailing all the time. And, as we know, we've said it before, you don't get a rehearsal for these conversions. So if you do get an obstacle, how as a team do you all pull together and overcome them? Kholosa, do you want to kick off?
I really try to concentrate on everyone's mental health, understanding that everyone is it's going to take a toll, and just understand that everyone's feelings are valid. and nobody is overreacting in any situation at any point, because this is, again, a situation nobody prepared for. It's not rehearsed. It's all happening all at once. So I really did try to do daily check-ins with everyone individually as much as I could. My daily check-ins were with the principal dentist, so I vented to her, but I did try and make sure that on a daily basis I check in with everyone. I think that it's also so important to also be present throughout the day as well, to just try and be that buffer, because I found that sometimes um, they will have a negative experience, and then they'll be like, oh, this is what this person said to me. They talk it out, and then they feel better. Suddenly they're happy and answering the phone as normal. So that also, that room to just exhale a bit throughout the day is also very important. So um, alongside with evening check-ins, like evening huddles, like, how does everyone feel about today? How did you manage? Are you feeling okay? Happy? Good. Okay, see you tomorrow. But during the day as well, and just check, are you managing? If they're not, you give them a break, swap a little bit, because again, I really think I would really, really, really encourage people to be very, very gentle with their team during a conversion, because people are experiencing things they've never experienced before. Because even though I think our conversion, when compared, because when we converted, a lot of practices in our county had converted already, so we didn't really get that much media bashing or anything like that, but we did still have people who were calling and they were upset and they were using foul words, towards the team. So it's so, so important to just be that buffer for them throughout the day, and then check in at the end of the day, make sure that people go home okay. But it is usually for a short period of time, so you have to just have that patience for just that little bit of, like, that 2 weeks of that, because it doesn't last long. It feels like it's a long time when it's happening,
Yes.
but it doesn't actually last long. So to clear your schedule and just be there for your team, and understand that everyone's feelings are genuine, and everyone's mental health could actually take a bit of a dip because of the
Yeah.
things that they're hearing about themselves. It's so, so important to have that in mind. So I try to concentrate on that a lot when we do
Fabulous.
ours.
Thank you. You've touched on some interesting topics there. I'm going to come across to Jen just to give us some insight with regards to anything that you had to address whilst you were going through the conversion process as a team, any obstacles that you may have had. Oh, can you hear me, Jen? There we
Yeah,
are.
sorry, my computer froze a second there, but I'm back.
Fabulous.
I mean, one of the things that Kholosa mentioned then about media bashing, that was something that we definitely experienced. We had a Wales Online article about us, which I think, as I said, the mindset of my staff at the point of going into the conversion was end of our tether. Really pushed to the extreme by the NHS work. So when the Wales Online article was there, fortunately, I mean, that the journalist that wrote it was actually very even-handed, and was not actually criticising us as a practice, but was actually probably more critical of the health board, who had been, bragging about having all these new patient appointments and all this. And so then having practices leaving the NHS or reducing their NHS contract looks very bad for the health board. So the article was actually very, I would say, very fair in that respect. But it still is that extra attention on us. And as you can imagine, comment sections are a vile place to be. But the staff kind of went into that as almost finding it a bit funny, like a bit of a novelty, because they'd already seen so many articles about other practices in other parts of the country. It was such like a formulaic kind of article now. We've seen it so many times. It was like this novelty of, oh, it's about us. And so, I think having that kind of, we talked about it a lot at work, and we didn't have many patients asking about it, but just kind of having that really open chat about it and finding the funny side in these things. And there's no such thing as bad publicity, and it's it wasn't as negative an experience as you might think it was.
That's good.
Oh,
I feared
I'm
that the most.
again, aren't I? It's great to hear that you were able to work through that together. And do you know what, Jen? I think it's kind of anticipated to a degree, isn't it? But it sounds like you managed the situation incredibly well at the practice with the team there. Lucie, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think for me, there are a few kind of things when you're trying to overcome those objections or those obstacles that throw up. What I find is dental practices can sometimes be drama-filled places, and we as humans will do it as well. There's a reason why soap, dramas are a thing. We do like to kind of revel sometimes in that dramatic, negativity, and actually, what we have to do is be a force of positivity and just change the mindset and the way that we address it. So, I absolutely agree with Jen in I think the first thing is not to necessarily ignore things, to allow people space to vent to a degree, but then there also has to be a movement to say we're positive and we look to the positive. And actually there is an incredible clip of Simon Sinek, who wrote his book Start With Why, who describes addressing that positivity and why it's so important, because actually the majority, the really vocal kind of middle ground, they will look left and right to positivity and negative, about which one they should be in. And if we draw kind of attention to positivity, they'll move into that, and what you'll find is your team just sort of naturally moves that direction. So for me, everything's very visual, it's very metric based, it's very, things like teaching your team that when they're taking a call that is not very nice, it's okay to hang up the phone call after it, in whichever way it finishes, and stand up from your desk, walk away and come back to your desk, even if it's a split second. That moment, that breath, means you don't answer the phone, the next telephone call, in the state that you have just finished the last call. I think that's what's really important. And I talk a lot about, it's show business, baby. This is us and we're out there. But we have to remember that that's great, and that's what we need, and that's what the patient needs, is show business. But we also have to recognize that there's a human on the other side of it, and we just need to be looking at how we are propping them up. So yeah, positivity, a place filled with kind of light. And yes, there is a time to vent and to rant and to have a kind of, oh, this is really irritating, but then we move on. We go, right, we've done enough of that. Let's get cracking.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. That's been super insightful. I've got one last question here that I'd just like to ask. I can see that the time ticking on. How do I keep my team motivating during such a very busy time? And I think that's $1 million question, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Everybody is looking for the golden kind of thing. I think for me, it starts with asking them what they are after, what they want from their job, what they want from life, what are we searching for? And we talk about this a lot, everywhere. And I know everybody is thinking really long and hard about it, but we are seeing a massive drop in morale just in general, and I think that's widespread across lots of industries. I think that we've been through, as a country, as a world, quite a lot, and we continue to go through quite a lot. And I think it is hard sometimes to pick yourself up and keep going when it feels like we're in that. And I do think coming out of last year, people are starting to feel a little bit battle worn, and so I think it's really normal for us to do that. So I think, again, we have to go back to that. What does healthy look like for people? What does well-being look like for teams? And are we giving our teams an opportunity to flourish in the role that they're in?
Fabulous. Thank you, Lucie. And then I'll just get a final wrap up from Jen and Kholosa on this about how to keep your team motivated. Some top tips from you, ladies.
Number one is snacks. Provide snacks in the
Never fails, does it?
Always dental practice.
Always keep it going. So snacks, definitely. numbers. So having, I told everybody this is the number of planned patients we need to be equivalent to the NHS population we have at the moment. So they knew, right, okay, this is my target. We need to hit this number. And so it was like, oh, okay, we're halfway there. Or we're 60% there, we're 70% there. But like counting down, like, oh, we're nearly there. And it felt like a sense of achievement for everyone. Everyone was really kind of, when we finally hit the target number, everyone was just, so excited. And it felt like it was worth it at that point.
Yeah.
And then, the final thing is that light at the end of the tunnel, when they have been working so hard, pretty thanklessly with the NHS, it did feel like there was just that hope that it was going to get better.
Yeah, fabulous. And it did. It did. It really did. And Kholosa, yourself?
I think what really did uplift our team was a training course that we did together to just try and get everyone to be able to adopt a new patient journey approach. And it was away from the practice. So we did a whole day out situation. Now I know this is going to be costly and practice owners are going to be like, oh no, but it does help. Because then you have everyone having the same objective in that day where they're like, okay, I'm going to learn this. And each person learned their own thing that they thought, okay, this will help me do better. So, for example, reception, there were tips about how to handle patients on reception. There were tips about how the nurse can also participate on chairside and communicating with the patient. There were tips for everyone. So I found that did get everyone, it got the team motivated. Generally, they were generally motivated team because you foster that work culture before the conversion. So by the time you're converting, you know that you have a very strong team of people that are excited for you. And for what you're doing. But I found that the trip away from work, take a day, half a day actually, take a half a day, get everyone to do the same thing, and then everyone is sort of implementing what they learned, and they were sort of uplifted and motivated by that.
Nothing like team building, is there?
Yeah, and snacks, of course.
And snacks.
Always.
Yeah, I've had one question come in that's a little bit different. I would like to put that out there just to get your thoughts on this. I'll steer this to you, Lucie. One of my colleagues did try a partial conversion but failed and couldn't stay in the practice. I'm sorry to hear that. Would you say this practice is not safe for a full conversion? The majority of the patients were saying, if I got the chance to be seen under the NHS, why would I be seeing you privately? And what are the thoughts about your experiences? Would you advise this person not to convert? I mean, I've got my own thoughts on this, but I'll hand it.
I would definitely convert. I don't think that one experience, I think as we've heard tonight from Jen and Kholosa, who've both been through it, it takes a huge amount of work, and we can't do I'm not sure I can say, can you say half-assed on a webinar? But I don't think you do a half-assed job. I think you have to be, really in it. It has to be, you can't be beige. You have to be out there. You are who you are. You're doing it, and this is why you're doing it. And I think that for me is the biggest kind of point is that no, I don't believe that just because somebody else has tried and failed, it's not the right thing. I think the more we see, the more we read, the more we are, learning together that we're going to need to move towards this light, which is private dentistry, and it's unsustainable. And unfortunately, I would be more concerned about someone who didn't try and didn't put their everything into it than I would about the other version of they tried and I'm not going to do it.
I think it raises a lot more questions for me. I would be going back to why did it fail? What processes were in place? What message was being given to the patients? Were patients still able to access new NHS appointments, taking on with other dentists in the practice? You have to be very, very clear about your processes and your operations before you embark on a conversion. So, if this is something that you're toying with, and we'd be very happy to to speak to. So you need to look at the whole, what is going on in that practice as a whole, before you get going. So it just needs a little bit more.
And also
to give a good answer to that, but I agree with you, Lucy. You know,
also, I think it's that time thing of, even a year ago, the patient base was in a different place than it is now. You know, in my own hometown, the GP practice has just been bought out by a kind of little corporate, and it's causing kind of chaos. But actually, people are comparing it to dentistry, because suddenly more people are engaged with, actually, this is where it's going. So don't forget that your patient base are going to know a bit more as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say in my experience, so I knew that financially it was enough for just myself to transition to private. The associates, I gave them the option. I said, if you want to stay NHS, I will support that. If you want to convert to practice plan, I'll support that too. You tell me what you want to do. And I think you need the dentist to be fully on board, because ultimately they're the one that's selling it. You know, if they need to believe in what they're providing as well. So, you know, I don't want to convince somebody to change to be a private dentist. If they want to stay NHS, fine. that's absolutely fine. It was just that the whole practice couldn't be NHS. So it works quite well if you're converting specific associates, because you can say to them, well, there are no NHS associates to see you. To stay with the practice, you will need to join a plan. So that's how it worked for us, and that was very successful for us.
Yeah, fabulous. Thanks ever so much. I mean, it's so helpful. You know, these are huge decisions people are wanting to make. It's the biggest decision you're going to make, you know, in your dental career, handing back your NHS contract. You need to know that you can replace that income, that it's going to be sustainable, and you can future-proof your business to move forward the way you want to, in the best way for your patients, to continue to provide that really great ongoing care, and also to keep the business robust for you and your team, and have those nice working environments that Kholosa mentioned, and have that less stress, that Jen, and just to make it pay its way, basically, isn't it? So I'm very conscious at time. I knew we'd run over. I knew us four could not get on a screen and clock it all up in an hour. If we haven't answered your questions today, and you've got some more questions that you want to ask us as a viewer, please do just pop it into the chat, and we will share these questions with Lucy, Jen and Kholosa, and we will respond and send them all out to you at a later date. And of course, if you've got any more questions or queries about completing an NHS conversion, or you just like a little bit of advice, you're very welcome to contact us at Practice Plan, where we'll be very happy to put you in touch with one of our team of NHS specialists who can talk with you. Ladies, it's been absolutely lovely speaking with you tonight. Thank you very much for sharing your own personal experiences and your expertise with myself and the viewers this evening. I think it's been very helpful for the people watching to know all the things that you've had to go through, all the experience that you pull upon, and how, more importantly, to keep their team at the heart of their NHS conversion and ensure that it is as successful as it can possibly be. So that's it from us this evening. That's a wrap. Have a wonderful evening, everybody, and that's good night from us. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye. I feel like I'm going to have to say something because I wasn't.